Welcome to our ethical issue presentation on surrogate parenting. This presentation has been put together by Melanie Lawal, Stacy Butch, and Angela Toledo. So to begin, we're going to discuss surrogacy itself. Surrogacy is defined as the practice by which a woman, who is referred to as a surrogate mother, becomes pregnant and gives birth to a baby in order to give it to someone who could not have children. With surrogacy, there's 3 different types. To begin, we'll have generic surrogacy. This is the most common, and that's where the surrogate mother uses her own eggs and has it fertilized by the commissioning male, which would be one of the adoptive parents. The surrogate mother is then biologically related to this child. Then there's the total surrogacy, where the mother's egg is fertilized with the sperm of a donor, not the male part of the commissioning couple. And these days there's not always a male part of the commissioning couple, so if they were 2 women that were going through a surrogate pregnancy, they would have, a donor that would be unknown for the surrogate to carry a baby. Finally, there's the gestational surrogacy, or a full surrogacy. And this is where the commissioning couple's sperm and egg have gone through vitro fertilization and then get implanted into the surrogate's uterus, and then this mother would not be genetically linked to the child. Now, with surrogacy, there's 2 different types of arrangements. The altruistic pregnancy, typically they're not paid for the services. They're usually a good friend or a relative, and generally they have a pre-existing bond between the surrogate mother and the couple. If you're into social media, you'll find that you'll see stories like this happen quite a bit. I've seen where it's been a sister will carry and have a total surrogacy for another sister, where it's her sister's egg and the brother-in-law's sperm, and then they do the vitro fertilization and she carries for them. They've also had a very similar situation where it was the mother that carried for a daughter that was unable to have children. And then there's the commercial surrogacy, and that's going to be through a company that's pays the mother for the service. And the agency will arrange everything, and the surrogate mother will need to go in and have testing and make sure that they're healthy enough to carry a pregnancy and able to go through any medications that are needed to have vitro fertilization. And this is going to be a lot of paperwork because, the couples need to mesh and make sure that they're on the right page. Lawyers are involved, and some of those things are also with the altruistic pregnancy as well, or surrogacy as well. But this one's a lot more hardcore and intense because these people don't truly know each other. So here's just an image with the types of surrogacy. There's always going to be some sort of a contract, but ultimately it's going to be one woman carrying another couple's baby, whether it's going to be her egg, whose sperm, but ultimately, it's somebody else's uterus that's carrying this child. Now, major arguments, the proponents for this surrogacy program, they feel like it allows the couples to have biological children when conceiving naturally is not an option, which some people, that's so very important to them. It's cheaper than actual fertility treatments. It avoids the painful procedures and costs associated with the fertility treatments. And fertility treatments have been shown to be less successful than surrogacy. Surrogacy has a 1 in 4 success rate, and adoption can take years. It's not always easy to find, a couple that you can adopt from. You have so many home visits and all of these issues in order to adopt in itself, and that's also still very expensive. And so here's just some images of, trying to make a family be part of the surrogacy experience. And I did like this quote that said, "Little souls find their way, whether they're from your womb or someone else's." So, some people think that it doesn't matter how they get there. They're there and they're going to be part of your family. And now to go to the opponent side of this. These are just some images, but, the big thing is that they feel like they're renting out someone's body. There's never a guarantee of a healthy, happy outcome with pregnancies and births in general. there are always risks, and complications are always a possibility, and disappointment's also a possibility. It's sometimes looked at as a form of prostitution. Women are selling their bodies for money in some form. It makes the child look like it's a commodity. They're losing the bond from a mother that's sometimes gained during pregnancy and that pregnancy experience, as they discuss the kicking and the feeling of the moving. And sometimes they feel like it's baby selling, especially in the case where the surrogate's using her own embryo, or not embryo, but her own egg. And even with the cost, and that's also included with that whole baby selling, it's very expensive and a lot of people can't afford it. Most insurance companies do not cover the actual surrogacy. All medical costs are out of pocket, and it can exceed over $40,000. In some locations, surrogate mothers retain the rights to the child. And I know for a fact that the surrogate, regardless of any biological attachments, will have to actually sign over and let the other parents are adopted parents ultimately, regardless if they are biological or not. Sometimes there's custody battles. Surrogate mothers can change their minds in the end, especially when they are the biological mother. Plus, there's the emotional attachment to the child by the surrogate mother, and if the surrogate mother is part of a family, has a husband or other children, there's an emotional attachment that the children have through this process as well. And then there's no control over how the surrogate mother is actually going to behave during this pregnancy. Agencies will screen and do the best they can to get someone that's going to be healthy and willing to go through this properly, but they could expose the baby to alcohol, drugs, smoking, and just several other risk factors that nobody expected to happen. So as we continue through, the ethical questions that kind of come up when we think of this surrogacy. Who does the child really belong to? Custody battles in cases where the surrogate changes their mind. Like I said, especially in the aspect where the surrogate is the biological mother. It happens. It happens in cases where, a woman's going to give a baby up for adoption and they change their mind. It's not an easy thing. Is it right to accept money for the situation? Is it a form of prostitution? Is it a form of baby selling? Are we doing this for a good cause? Or are you just selling your eggs in order to make money? It's a very fine line. What if the baby is not what they expected, or is born with a disability or a medical complication? And nobody wants to take the responsibility of the baby. Who ultimately is the parent? What happens at this point in time? What if the child, wants to find that surrogate later? How will they understand this when they're older? Will they feel like they were rejected, especially if the surrogate was the biological mother? Harm that could be done to the surrogate or the commissioning parents for this. And, you never understand how it's going to go until it's all done. I would think that a mother that's done surrogacy before would have a better grasp on it. But, are the parents that are going to take this baby going to feel like it's theirs? The parties involved really understand the risks. Even with informed consent, and as I mentioned before, when you have a baby, it doesn't always turn out the way we intend it to. So do we really know what the possibilities are? What if there's multiple gestations and they don't agree on a reduction? Or what if there's a major health complication, but the family wants to keep it because they've been trying so long for this baby, but the surrogate mother doesn't want to take the risk? And that's, does the surrogate have the right to do what they want with their body? It's a very fine line, and that is why they try to screen and have a good understanding of the surrogate and the other couple, but you never truly understand until you're set into that situation. What about any over embryos from in vitro fertilization, what do they do with those? Depending on who you ask, a life begins at conception, and technically, these embryos are conception. And then the religious considerations. Some groups will feel like, these are not truly children that should have been made, and there could be a lot more complications than what they expected. So, some more potential outcomes. The child could be in harm's way if surrogacy doesn't go as planned. And, you never know. You could find out as a surrogate parent the child was in an abusive situation and you handed this child over. The surrogate mother also has potential danger with possible physical and mental complications. Like I said, what happens if birth goes wrong and the mother was to die? These are things that we never truly understand. And plus the added stress for everyone, which can just add added turmoil into families. Families may not accept the fact that, this child was conceived through surrogacy. Especially if they have a religious basis of it. The child could suffer with a disability, especially if we're using an unknown donor of some sort. We never know if we're going to run into a risk of genetic complications. And then the compensation. Who pays for what, including the loss of employment for the surrogate mother. There's so many different factors. Will the surrogate mother insurance pay for this? Some insurance companies will pay for any pregnancy regardless of how it stemmed. So there are a lot of different ways that this could go. So physicians and healthcare systems can get confused about the total realm of the care that needs to be included. The receiving family may decide differently on what they want, and the medical health system must look at all aspects, including medical, ethical, legal, and psychological. A big thing is who makes the decisions. If there's a major health issue, who's going to make the final call, especially if it's a situation where the biological parents haven't truly adopted this child and it still ultimately belongs to the surrogate. What happens if they don't agree? If there's an issue where it's life support, feedings, intubation, but nobody's on the same page, who do they have to follow? Passing on information about the baby to, would-be new family members. HIPAA's always a big issue. So, some spiritual implications. Relationships with the partners. One may feel like they're all into it, and maybe sometimes, they want to have the baby, but they're not truly ready to deal with some of the emotional issues that come along with it. The couple may face a stigma, from people that believe that this child should not have been created in this form, and that'll cause strife in everyday life. Surrogacy, as I said, can be seen as prostitution, and so the mother that believes that she's doing a good job could have issues, especially if a mother is surrogate for, a homosexual couple and is a part of a church. That could be something that they maybe have issues with. Family may have more problems with that. So it's a really hard situation. And some women love the fact that they're able to help a family who cannot conceive, and it brings them such peace. And you see that a lot in situations where it's altruistic and the mother carries a child for her daughter. So being able to carry their own grandchild, brought them tighter together as a family. But sometimes that's more socially acceptable than maybe paying somebody else money to do this. And finally, the nursing impact. As I said, HIPAA is a big thing. Who can we pass on information to? Who's going to call the shots in this? What if it's a mother that doesn't want shots and the surrogate does? Who are we going to listen to? Where's the conflict? Added family conflict. We're going to have more issues where visitors and, it's going to make things a lot harder when the surrogate is still ultimately in charge. And plus the future struggles with passing on information if we don't know a donor. How are we going to provide education on, different health issues? And here are our references, and we hope we passed on